and in this video I'm going to talk about Microsoft Purview, why it exists, what it accomplishes, and dive into one of its core capabilities called Microsoft Purview Information Protection. Let's dive in. Okay, so first things first, what is Microsoft Purview? So here I am in the public information on Microsoft Purview from the Microsoft Learn dashboard. Essentially, it is an umbrella branding for all things Microsoft risk and compliance and data governance solutions. So have a look here at this diagram. So this diagram is brilliant because it essentially encompasses everything that Purview entails, right? So on the left-hand side here, we have risk and compliance tools, or tools that are coming from the many years of the Microsoft 365 stack of solutions. So think of solutions such as Compliance Manager, think of also records management, insider risk management, data loss prevention or data loss protection components, all of these different solutions that are part of the Microsoft E5 compliance stack are part of the risk and compliance part of this Purview diagram right here. Okay. But not only that, Purview is a brand of solution or branding for all things encompassing risk and compliance, but also data governance, right? So the data governance aspect on the left-hand side here is actually comprised of what has been previously known as Azure Purview for the past year or so, right? So Azure Purview was announced in 2021 as the multi-cloud and hybrid solution for data governance across all these different clouds, but also across different workloads. And essentially, Microsoft Purview comes in to put all of these solutions under the same product name. Okay, that's simply put, that's what it is. Now, what I want to touch on here is the different aspects of these different solutions, how they integrate. And before I actually go down that path, let me touch on everything that is included in risk and compliance and governance. So essentially, Microsoft is putting under Microsoft Purview everything that it can do around governance, risk, and compliance. Now I'm bringing up this other page from AWS, and I'm doing so with purpose and with an intent to actually showcase that this is a broader industry-wide look at how to govern, how to manage risk, and how to ensure compliance against a number of different standards. This is not only Microsoft relevant, this is not only relevant to customers who have their data on the Microsoft 365 stack, but it's a much broader conversation. Now, this is a great look at what GRC is. And if we look in this diagram right here, we can actually briefly understand what is governance. Governance is a set of standards that are aligned to business requirements. So depending on what your customer is or what your business needs to adhere in terms of industry. So if you're in healthcare, you have specific standards that you need to abide to. If you are in the financial industry, you have other industry standards that you need to align to. If you're on governments, there are other industry standards that you need to abide to. So governance is identifying what are the standards that your organization needs to abide to, and then identifying which one of these are actually relevant to your business, right? And then what comes next would be the risk assessment. And then you're assessing those risks, and then you're potentially addressing and creating technical or other types of controls to mitigate those risks whenever possible. Or even there might be instances of where risk is actually acceptable because of many multiple reasons. Finally, there's then compliance, which is the ability for organizations to understand and assess how they're doing in terms of what their business requirements are. Think of what has been defined in the governance phase versus what has been defined in the risk phase, right? So compliance is actually going to tell back to the business or third-party entity how you're doing against what you set out to do or what you're required to do. And Microsoft Purview is exactly providing all of these capabilities under the same solution name, right? Essentially, that's what Purview is. Now, within Purview itself, as you go through the official public documentation, you'll see that there's a raft of different solutions in here. Like I briefly mentioned before, Insider Risk Management, Compliance Manager, Microsoft Information Protection, or MIP, for example. There are all different solutions that are part of risk and compliance. And then within data governance, you have Azure Purview with different capabilities for multi-cloud governance. Now, what's really key for us to understand here is that the integration between them is essentially taking information from MIP, Microsoft, or Microsoft Purview Information Protection with the new naming, taking information from data classification and labels that were created in there, and sending them to the data governance aspects of Microsoft Purview or Microsoft Data Governance nowadays, which used to be called Azure Purview before. Right? So when you bring in those little tags from Microsoft Purview Information Protection to Data Governance, you actually get to see your workloads, understand what data is sitting in there, but also understand what potential sensitive labels would be applied or need to be applied to that specific workload in here. So think of a server who is providing an application service to someone at some stage in your organization. Then you need to understand if there is private information in there, for example. By knowing that it does house specific private information, it then comes down to a security team to actually enforce proper controls and so on and so forth. And then the conversation can go different ways, right? Think of even DevSecOps conversation where there would even be processes spinning from this understanding of this process, this public data or private data being in some workloads where there are an intentional redesign of the development process might even spun up. Okay, cool. So if we look at risk and compliance and how Microsoft Purview and it is actually implemented, we're essentially looking at the Microsoft E5 stack. So if I bring up here Microsoft 365maps.com, which is one of my preferred resources to understand what's inside the E5 stack, I can look over here on the right-hand side, Microsoft 365 E5 compliance, and I can have a look at everything that's included into this stack, the compliance stack, right? And when we say compliance in this context of D5, we're actually meaning risk and compliance. And then you can see all the different buckets and all the different capabilities included in these different buckets. Now, this is important from a licensing perspective, a bundling perspective, but also from a technical perspective. It's good to understand what's included in there. So this is all the capabilities, all the features that you can get with this stack. If we were to go a step further and we're trying to understand how to actually start managing some of that capability, we can go into essentially if you go into the admin center, naturally you can jump into the compliance portal on the left hand side here under admin centers, but you can also go straight up to compliance.microsoft.com and then you'll be taken to the compliance dashboard. Now over here you can find all the different components that I mentioned before, compliance manager, for example. You can also have a look at data loss prevention, another licensed capability. You can have a look at this e-discovery, right? Data lifecycle management, information protection, information barriers, and so on and so forth. So all of these different capabilities are different dashboards or different parts of this dashboard that you can configure. And of course, when we have a look at the Purview dashboard itself, this is a demo tenant, one that has no actual production or real data in here, but what's really valuable from this demo tenant is the ability for me to actually showcase what are different deployment and labeling capabilities and data classification capabilities of the solution. Okay, so this was a very quick explanation of why Microsoft Purview exists, what it entails, and a very brief look at how to get started with the management through the compliance.microsoft.com dashboard. Thank you for watching this video, and in the future I will have a deeper look at the dashboard for it. Thank you.